To many people, it's a relic from the past, but for those in the know, ham radio is still a relevant and vital form of communication. Last Thursday, the Hamilton Amateur Radio Club held a class at Westdale Secondary for newcomers looking to get their operating licenses.
We decided to move the club ahead. How are we going to do that? We're going to start teaching amateur radio. We hadn't done it. It had been more than 10 years. Nobody had bothered to teach it. So we reached out to the community. We set up these classes like you see now. This is a small class, but we've had larger. Our membership has grown in the last 2 years from about 20 to now we have close to 70 members.
Like most hobbies, each member, new and old, has their own story when it comes to first developing their interest.
My father was a radio amateur in the days when you built everything by hand, like as John was saying at the lecture. And all the way through public school and high school, I really wanted to get my ham license, but I was so busy with other activities. And it took me a long time, like right through until I was 45 years old, before I finally found the time, competing with career and family, what have you, to get my license.
I've always been scientifically inclined since I was a little kid. I've always been interested in radio, so after playing with radios most of my life, I finally decided to get a ham radio license.
I bought a shortwave receiver a number of years ago, and I phoned up a fella who I knew was a ham and asked him when where I could listen on the shortwave receiver to hear the Canadian hams talking. And he gave me a whole bunch of frequencies, and I tuned in and was listening to the hams, quite enjoying it. And then he phoned me up a couple of weeks later and said, there's a ham course starting in a week, why don't you take it? And so I phoned the guy, and bingo, I was a ham.
As for the continued popularity, each member has their own explanation.
There's all kinds of activities that hams can get involved with, and in the community, there's the Boy Scouts, there's parade activities we get involved with. I'm hoping to see the club get more involved in emergency operations. So we're becoming more and more active. And I think Hamilton is probably ranked, out of all the ham clubs across Canada, we're probably number 2.
People tend to think ham radio was a 50s, 60s type of thing, and it was more common back then, I would say, but it's picking up again. Ham radio is a standalone system. If cell phones go down, the internets go down, we're still there. We can still communicate. So if you're into that sort of stuff, it's a good hobby to get into.
3 things you're an amateur for. You're allowed to communicate with other people. You're allowed to, we call it technical investigation. Basically, we experiment. And self-education. It's the most amazing hobby. And once you get your ticket, there's as many branches of amateur radio as there are radio amateurs. So everybody does their own thing.
With a dedicated following and an eye towards future events, it's clear that the Hamilton Amateur Radio Club, and ham radio in its own right, is definitely here to stay. For Mohawk Journalism, I'm Ben Diamond.